All right, welcome again, everyone, to another episode of 123 Chess. My name's Luke,
I'm
and and in addition to us, we have four special guests with us today. We have Jacob, Joseph, Chris, and Ross, and we are here to go over our games from our first ever club tournament that we did, and the Fall 2020 Open. And so we're just basically going to kind of glean our collective knowledge together as we go over these games. So pretty informal, but I'm glad you guys have joined us because hopefully you'll be enriched in this experience as well. So without further ado, Tom, would you like to go ahead and kick it off with your game?
Yeah, so if you guys have been following us at all, I really love my E4 opening, so I wasn't going to deviate from that too much. The only game that I have so far with Luke has been when I did my C4 English opening, just as a spur of the moment thing to try out. Luke responds with an E5. This was my game with Luke during our tournament. And so far, we're getting into pretty traditional lines. Luke's probably expecting me to move my pawn to d4 at this moment, moving into the Scotch, because that's what I love to do. But Luke and I had actually discussed two openings prior to this that both of us said we were kind of uncomfortable with. One was the Sicilian defense, and the other was the Roy Lopez.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
Super popular, but yeah,
Yep.
we don't know it well.
So I decided to take a stab at it. I did actually, I don't know, it was probably 5 years ago that I was playing the Roy Lopez a lot. I had some pretty cool line. It was actually defending against the Roy Lopez, so actually leading an attack with the Roy Lopez was a little outside of my comfort zone. And actually the lines that I learned, it was really just like one specific opening trap that I really focused on, which we never got into. But I go there from the take, and we get the recapture. This is our pretty cool Roy Lopez line. And then we're off to the races.
That we are.
Yeah. I'm pretty comfortable bringing that pawn out into the middle. It's pretty consistent Scotch game, right? Pretty similar.
Yeah, I was going to say that's in the spirit of Scotch for sure.
In the spirit of the Scotch, yes. And then when the capture here, I end up bringing out my queen, which I felt was a bold move, but at the same time, what I really liked about it was this potential for advancing. I'm leaving the option of advancing this pawn. Still I'm being defended by my knight, right? Because if I had captured with my knight, then I don't have the ability to move that forward without him taking with with this bishop. And then Luke does this, which still allows me to go right into that, because normally putting your bishop there would pin that knight to my queen. That's usually a pretty good spot for that bishop in, but however, since I moved my queen, my knight is free to move. And at this point in time, I was like, I got him. Luke messed up. This is my game. I'm feeling good.
Because I did mess up.
Did mess up. Yeah. Having this fork here right out of the gate, like that's looking great. And then he did this, which I don't know why this was surprising to me. Like this, oh, sure, why not take that, right? And then I violated fundamental Luke rule that Luke has stated.
And what's that?
Since he has stated it, it shall not be deviated from. But I did deviate from it. And that is, when you have a fork, you have a limited amount of opportunity to take advantage of that fork. I did not take advantage of this fork because at this point in time, I'm like, well, I've got a fork. I'm still going to have the fork on my next turn, right? Right. If you think I'm going to have the fork on my next turn, you can pause the video and take a look in a minute how to get out of this fork. Because I said, okay, I'm going to have that fork next turn, so why not take the bishop right now? I did not have the fork because this happened. As you can see, that's blocking my pawn from capturing because I would be putting my king in check, and that is unfortunately against the rules.
Pins may be smaller than forks, and they may not be used for food, but they can be more powerful.
That's right. So all of my dreams were dashed, and I was like, oh, shoot, this is going to be a hard game. Luke is not just going to give me an easy win here. So we continued along these lines. And so here, from this position, really what the best move was, and this is through my analyses, I should have captured it. And I don't really know what I was afraid of at this point in time. I guess I was afraid of like the bishop capturing here, but if the bishop captures there, you know, why don't I just advance down here, and he's got to do something about that rook.
Yeah.
If he takes my rook, then I promote, and then I'm going to get his queen. So
it's a crazy, crazy game already.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy game already. So taking there definitely would have given me a real nice start. But I did not do that. And actually in retrospect, Lou,
yeah.
I don't know if you want to comment on this, but this was an option before that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a reason why you didn't do that instead of that bishop?
Well,
no, it was bishop and then this. Yes, that's where it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I realized after the moving my bishop to g4, I mean, when you do that with a bishop, you're like, hey, look, I'm open. It's never usually wise, under very few exceptions, to bring your bishop out, because I'm not pinning your knight to anything. I'm just saying, hey, here's a free bishop if ever my guarding piece is gone. So that move was definitely, I think that was one of my biggest mistakes in this opening.
Yeah. Another note too, since we're here, and I like quoting the great Ben Feingold, if you've watched any of these videos, is he has said the rule, don't put your minor pieces like this, here and here, if there's still a pawn in this file. If there's still a pawn in this file, that pawn can make it there and can fork those pieces.
Yep.
And so I think that's something cautionary tale for everybody to deal with.
Yeah, I have, and I'll bring this up in my analysis too later, but I have a real, like, we all have weaknesses, and one of my biggest weaknesses is you'll see me doing well in the opening very few times. I'm not good in openings. As the game progresses, I get better and better and better, but opening has always been a challenge for me.
Yep, that's the same thing I mentioned to Tom just not too long ago, actually.
Yeah. So we get here, Luke has been commenting on how frequently I do queenside castles.
Oh yeah, he's a fan of it.
I'm a fan of the queenside castle. And obviously what I'm starting to do here is I am the reason I like these queenside castles is I get to put my rooks in the center of the board. I trade off here to couple up those pawns because I know we're moving into the end game. Get that check, breaking up Luke's ability to castle, so I have control of that. And then here now, I am threatening to take the pawn with check. He can't move that bishop currently because it's pinned.
And I found a forcing line here, which helped me out.
Yes. So check. And there he goes. He does castling queenside the hard way.
The long way, the scenic route.
Yeah. And then I, I bounce back here to work on defending the pawn. These two pawns being probably my weakest point moving into the end game. Though I was feeling relatively solid at this point in time, I did feel like the game was mostly equal at this point. I probably could have had a better advantage had I capitalized on that opportunity earlier. But I didn't. And moving here, our pieces are in a pretty equal position. I've got my doubled pawns. We both have a couple of isolated pawns outside of our pawn clusters here. He's got the doubled pawns there. So yeah, I was comfortable with where we were moving into the end game here, and Luke speeds up the process by forcing these exchanges. We get this here, which forces one more exchange, and there we go. We're certainly into the end game.
That happened quickly.
It happened. So I want to. Part of my idea here at the time is I want to get my pawns off of these dark squares if possible, because the dark squares have the potential of getting hit by the bishop. It's not going to be able to go to the light squares. The one that's going to be big trouble is this pawn right here, because it's really going to be hard to move that one with this pawn in front of it.
Yep.
Also named the game Control the Center of the Board. I get this pawn out to control this square, but simultaneously it's also freeing up the movement of my king, which I need to do to get my king to the middle.
King's in the middle. King's in the middle.
And hey, moving it to a light square. So there you go. One. Luke's moving his king to the middle too. This is endgame, basic technique, right? Luke, I dare you to take that exchange.
Yeah, no way.
No way. He's not going to do that.
I'm not going to fix your pawn mess.
Yeah, and so we're just going to keep moving these kings in the middle. Again, getting on these light squares to not have a problem. I've got a pretty solid pawn structure here with these 3 pawns in a row. And I'm not going to fix his pawn mess either, right? If he's going to take, I'm going to take with my king. Then we're going to get into this mess here. And this is where we start to get into something that looks better for me. Right, Luke? Fair to say?
Yeah. Well, the whole theme here, as I mentioned before, was my bishop is in a bad spot and it could potentially get stuck. That's the fear from my end.
Yeah. And so, moving here, I'm defending that pawn with my king. This is now going to get to the point where I'm freeing up my knight for a movement. I am sacrificing the square process, which Luke will capitalize on. Oops. And then that sets us off to the races, right? Because now, now Luke is really probably favored on my queen side, but I've got the advantage on the king side. He gets to be up that pawn structure there. We check down to here, which is going to force that pawn to move or be captured. Move, but then it gets captured next turn. But he gets to advance his king. Take.
And that stupid bishop of mine. Oh my goodness.
Stupid bishop is pretty stuck here. And I don't know. I don't know if at this point in time I could have capitalized on it more. Just looking at it at the moment.
Yeah. The problem is my queenside majority.
The problem is your queenside majority, right? I mean, the thing is, and I said I was doing a lot of this on the fly. Here's me doing it on the fly, right?
Does anyone else have anything you want to add here? Like anything interesting or noteworthy that you want to chime in on?
So Luke, why did you move the pawn instead of taking his pawn on b3?
So I guess my intention with that is I was trying to, I didn't really have a good reason. In all honesty, yeah, go ahead.
I think if he had taken on b3, I would have gotten to promote. Because if he does this, I do this.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, because I was looking at the amount of, like, the count of moves to get a queen. And I think if I remember correctly, that's a good point. That's probably why I was doing it.
Yeah, the best he can do, the fastest promotion he's going to get is either moving this pawn forward or moving his king to the side. But either one of those moves, I'm going to do this, and my pawn is going to get a promotion before his.
Yeah.
But of course, I do have my bishop.
Yeah, but if you moved your bishop to h2, then he would just move his pawn, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was my problem. For 20 moves.
Yeah. So he did that, and at this point in time, if I tried to do this race now, right now he gets to advance first, and if I capture, he's still ahead, and he's still going to get that promotion first.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So what we ended up having was this. I did move. He moved forward, right? And we're getting into that pawn race. But that forces me to get my knight into the game to prevent that from getting that promotion. Finally, the bishop is freed. Come out of hiding.
Now from here, my next move is so bad. I mean, I had like no time on my clock, to be fair, but like, it was so bad. This was probably my worst move of the game.
Yeah, because right here, I mean, I guess the better move would probably be.
Yep, because then your king can't. There's nothing you can do productive at that.
So coming out, coming down, preventing the pawn from advancing, getting ready to capture with my.
Okay.
Yeah,
I should have. Wrong order of operations there on my end.
And for anybody who's doing some learning, any bit of advice I can throw, a big taking pawns is remembering to stop their advance.
Yeah.
You're just thinking like, okay, well, I'm just going to move my piece that attacks that pawn. You're always giving your opponent the option of like, okay, I'm just going to move the pawn and screw up your attack. Or I'm not going to move the pawn to where you think I'm going to move my pawn, right? I'm just going to hold off on moving it and move my other pieces to prepare the attack. So you want to freeze that pawn in place. And with my king being on a light squared, there's literally no piece that Luke has that is going to be able to free up that pawn.
Underscoring the tragedy of me not moving to b3.
Yeah, and
so
I
know.
There's the fork.
Yep.
And there's the fork.
That's the fork. You see
There's the fork. Oh, we all see the fork. We all see it, and no, we didn't all see it.
At this point, I was like, I'm dead. And then somehow a miracle happened and he missed it.
I did. I saw it, like, as soon as I moved, I was like, oh, I should have gone for that bishop.
Wow.
For anybody who didn't see, that was that beautiful move right there.
I was so low in time too. I did a terrible job of time management in this game.
Yeah, and that would have been game over had that happened.
Yeah,
but it didn't. I moved there.
We kept going.
I moved there, going with my plan of I'm going to take that pawn. That pawn is mine. Luke says, "Thank God, take that pawn."
Oh my goodness! And now something else is going to happen, which is kind of reminiscent to that in the other way.
Yeah, watch this move. This move on my part here.
Oh, does everyone see it?
Everyone see the blunder.
Oh.
Everyone see it? No, not everybody. sees it.
Oh, wow.
And that's why this game is the first one we're looking at.
Oh my
wow.
goodness.
Oh man.
So there it is right there. Again,
Hey, we're even now, right?
right? We're even now. We're even now.
That's okay.
So-
I was watching Chris's game live at the end of it and going, put him in checkmate. Put him in checkmate. No.
Yeah. It's painful sometimes.
So we got here. I think at this point in time, I think Luke has it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say primarily due to the fact that my bishop can cover the whole board.
Bishop can cover the whole board and is in a very good spot. I move my knight here with the intention of I need to be able to stop that pawn advance. I can do it with my knight. I'm going to have to sacrifice my knight. But hey, and this was me thinking in the best of all hopes, I'm at least closer to the other side of the board than he is, so maybe I can get over there faster. Take, and then we go off to these races here. And
I barely made it there.
So,
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
What if you had done, instead of the taking, what if you'd moved your bishop down to d4? I guess you still have the threat of his h6, don't you?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. I do think the threat of the H pawn was concerning me the most, just because, I don't know, maybe I was being too conservative, but I just didn't want it to be able to get to H6. But I don't know.
Oh, you're saying to d4 to attack
To
this?
d4, yeah, to d4. Well, no, and to take the knight.
Oh yeah, because it's going to displace the knight.
Because I mean, if you move to h6, you take the knight.
Yeah.
If he moves d3, you take the knight. But if he moves the knight, then you move your a pawn.
Yeah.
And maybe keep that.
Huh.
Anyhow.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That certainly is interesting. I don't know.
But it underscores the power of the bishop versus knight in this kind of setting where you have such a open board.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I definitely took away from this game was the power of the bishop next to a pawn in the end.
Oh wow!
It's like a pawn duo, but plus, because it's not just a pawn.
Because yeah, I was thinking, okay, I can beat him over there with my king, which I can, right? My king gets over there. But
I was actually watching this game.
Yeah.
Because I logged in a little late.
Yeah.
And I think you made a mistake. This is about when I joined. I think you should have gone to G5 and then advanced the pawn on H6.
Yeah. So your king was covering the pawn.
Yeah, you're saying what move was it that you're talking about?
So if you move forward a little bit, keep going. I think.
Yeah. No, right there. Right there. Instead of going to E4, go to F5, F4. Excuse me. Stay on the dark squares.
No.
Your king.
Oh, I see it. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Or?
And then, he makes a move, presumably moving his king closer. You move your king to G5.
Yep.
And then you advance your pawn, whatever he does, on the next move.
Yeah.
Well, unless he puts you in check with F6.
Well, of course. And then in which case you just move to H5 and with the idea of forcing him to give up his bishop for your pawn.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Would he need to though? Because I thought
I didn't analyze this. I didn't use a computer. This is just I'm recounting my thoughts at the time.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of what ended up happening is I ended up getting that pawn to this position, but the problem is once he got his bishop here, because his knight was on F7, I was not able to move onto the G6 square.
Mm-hmm.
So G6 square was blocked from my king being so was the F6 square from the bishop. and the e6 square from this pawn, which really just bogged down my king movement. That ended up being my biggest problem. Because then once again I can move this, but it really doesn't help me with advancement at all, because now that pawn's blocking that one square that I could do.
Right.
And I still can't move. I still can't move to any of these. So my only way to get to that bishop is to do this garbage, and that's never going to fly.
But yeah, that is a good point though that Ross brought up, because the king, and at least you have the king to help out with the forcing move there, covering the pawn.
Yeah.
I mean, I think essentially it just buys time. Like I don't see a direct win per se from that, but at least it'll certainly get a lot closer to drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to say maybe that here, right? But again, because I mean, you could take, right? No, because you just
then the king moves.
Yeah, it's not really. It's hard to be productive in that situation.
So we get into this.
Yeah, I mean, we were both. Yeah, like Jacob said, we did not have much time.
Yeah. I do think these pawn moves that I was making back here ended up not being great, but again, not much productive left to do. And then
I played so bad here too. Like I was going so fast, and I'm like, I was going against everything I know is how you're supposed to handle this, and I'm like doing this little dance. I'm like, oh, I can't go that way. Let's go around the other way. It worked, but boy, was it painful. I tell you, I was like, man, everyone's watching this. This is so embarrassing.
Yeah. Then once we got to this, it's that's really fine. Yeah.
Cool.
So that was our game. The big things that I had for takeaways were again, up here at the end, the power of the bishop next to the pawn in the end game and preventing that king from advancing. Once again, blunder checks. I think that came from some pretty rapid end game playing, right? This move here in particular, along with that Luke had. And then, like we said too, with the fork at the beginning.
Capitalize on it when you have the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Capitalizing on forks when you have the opportunity to capitalize on. So yeah, those were my big ones.
Cool.
End of the day, I did really enjoy going through the Roy Lopez as an opening. I don't know that it's going to replace the Scotch for me, but it was fun.
Yeah, it's a solid one. Thanks, Tom. That's awesome. Does anyone else want to volunteer to go next? Anyone? Jacob, you want to go for it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sweet. So let's head over to that board here. And I guess this could kind of be a collective effort, because this is when you and Jacob played. So perhaps, Jacob, you can kind of kick it off, and then, your feedback both ways. And I just want to give a shout out to Jacob here, because, we've played some games recently and stuff, but like, kudos to you, man, because obviously like you have not been in this chess thing for very long at all. And while you've known how to play, this is like the first time you started to actually get into it. And so I just want to thank you for joining, because it was great to have you a part of it. And I hope you didn't feel too stressed beyond belief playing with all of us that are the chess geeks. So thanks for joining.
It was not easy. And well, shout out to you, because when you made that post to Facebook about, can you find the forcing line and the checkmate in 4, 5, 6 moves, whatever it was, I was hooked again. I hadn't played not since middle school, but that was when I played regularly. And then since then, it's like a handful of games throughout the years, if at all.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely hooked again.
Cool.
And then, so again, just trying to get comfortable with the whole thing again. And I really don't have a whole lot to say, except to just kind of review everything.
Yeah. And do you want to kind of open it up for if anyone has any input, like as we go?
Yeah, feedback is great. That's probably going to be the best way I'm going to learn. So
perfect. Let's do it.
Any advice and stuff like that. So, just trying to kind of stick with like the main. Okay, so I made this move here. Is everyone seeing the B3?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things I like to do is put pressure on rooks, and just wait for that to open up. So to bring my dark squared bishop out or something like that.
Fianchetto it. Yep.
And I just like doing that because that brings a lot more pressure off of me. That takes a lot more pressure off if I can steal a piece doing it that way.
And I know for me personally, historically, one of the hardest things for me is developing my bishops into a spot they'll want to be for the rest of the game. It's really hard to know. So that can help.
That is a problem I struggle with. So, and then that's why I just kind of like, if I can sneak a piece with it and then bring it back home, and because I don't know what else to do with it, So pretty good, pretty strong moves. Yeah, I feel like I had to make that move because I know on his next move he could have just moved his knight out, and it would have opened up the dark squared bishop to my rook, pinning my knight down anyway.
Here's a question: instead of that move, instead of moving the rook, you would move the bishop, your dark squared bishop, to B2.
Okay.
It feels kind of scary at first, but yeah, go ahead.
So if he had done that, I mean,
well, let me do that. Oh, there it goes. Like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could have traded a knight for a bishop there, because if I take E4 at that point with my knight, then he's either pinned there or he takes it, and then I take his bishop and I'm threatening his rook. So I'm up by
right. Yeah.
You're up by a pawn, but you are threatening. He would be threatening the pawn on C5 simultaneously.
Exactly.
True. So he
and then we move the rook to B2.
But I would be moving before he would. So I mean, I don't know. He surprised me with that move because that's not a typical thing that I see.
No.
Sicilian defense. So
I will, Jacob, I will say from personal experience for what this is worth, and maybe, I don't know, Ross, if you have any input on this too, but generally speaking, I very rarely see openings where the queen side bishop is fianchettoed early. You tend to get in trouble a lot of times, at least I do, when that happens, because it's a lot more natural for the king side bishop usually, unless you are kind of, I guess, familiar with the opening that utilizes that queenside fianchetto bishop early. It's usually not the one, like 9 out of 10 times, it's probably going to be the last or one of the last minor pieces to develop.
Yeah. The importance of castling is definitely taking on a prominent role, in my learning and stuff like that. So yeah, the kingside bishop would have made more sense. The reason I do it is because then I put more pressure on his king side if I'm able to make, bring my dark square across and bring it to his king side, and then that's where I would focus my attack. So
I've only seen that bishop developed early like that if you use the English opening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess he just kind of continues. There it is. There's my castle. I was pretty happy with that. And then he did it, and I was like,
no, he did it too.
One more move or something. So, and then now I can bring it over because now nothing's pinned to anything. And if I mess up, then I've got my rook in the back kind of guarding everything. Honestly, I'm struggling to remember my moves at this time. Okay, yeah, that was definitely a hanging piece there. I should have done something about that.
And the challenge from this point is that he has a really strong center. And so that
Exactly.
the pressure that is felt like manifold as time goes here.
It
So I
definitely
guess
is.
if I can jump in,
Yeah, go ahead. Totally.
if you don't mind. I mean, something that I would, I guess, offer as warning. I mean, I know it was kind of touched on with the fianchettoing on the queen side early on. I would say, unless you're Luke caliber of player and he just wants to with me, your best bet is to really steer clear of openings where you are fianchettoing bishops, just in general.
It's hard for beginners, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard for beginners. I still hate doing it because you can get into a lot of trouble in this. What ends up happening here, right? You end up getting into trouble because you want your focus to be on controlling the center, because whoever controls the center controls the board. And if you just look a little earlier on in your moves, right? Instead of developing, this center pawn here, you're moving that, and then your bishop only coming to this square again isn't coming out into a prominent role where it's controlling this center. I will offer this bit of advice, which helped me playing against fianchettoed bishops. So when I see something like that, it becomes one of his strongest pieces on the board.
It's arguably the strongest minor piece on the board, or will be.
Yeah, and so once you see that, you actually want to exchange bishops. You want to get rid of that bishop if because he's weakened. The disadvantage to this is he's weakened his pawn structure around his king, which is where he's likely going to castle. So the easiest way to do this, which you will see me do a lot in these games, is getting your dark squared bishop out to somewhere like here or here. Oops, here or here. And then after that, you can pop your queen up to that D2 square. Then when you move your bishop over to here, it's protected by this queen.
And Jacob, we actually had that happen in a game I played you. You remember that? Where I pulled that one on you when you had a fianchetto bishop.
And when this happens, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm taking, and fine, I'll take that exchange. But the problem is Black does not want to make that exchange in this position because of how strong this piece is.
Right.
And damage they did to their king side in moving that pawn up forward. So now when the queen is here, you're preventing this castle already. And as long as you can protect that square, you're ready for a checkmate. And so it's really devastating to do that. And so Black has to commit a lot of resources into making sure they're protecting the bishop. And that's just a really easy attack to do to knock it out of there.
Well said, Tom.
What's ironic is that he beat me to it. And that's the whole reason I brought out the B2 pawn to 3, so that I could bring my bishop there, and then for whatever reason, I didn't do it quite as quickly as he did, I guess.
Another, just to throw in one more quick thing. Generally speaking, there's a principle in chess where the idea is if someone's playing flank attacks or on the side of the board, play in the middle of the board. If someone's trying to play in the middle of the board, play a flank attacker on the side of the board. That general principle reigns true in a lot of cases. If someone's a lot stronger in a flank, then you get stronger in the center. So it's kind of like that's like one of the most natural and organic ways to address that kind of thing is if he's going to fianchetto bishop like that, getting your center strong, in addition to trading off, like Tom mentioned. Either one of those principles can be very helpful to help you wade through those waters.
And if you're looking for places for your bishop, my general advice, because I used to have that same problem of feeling like I didn't know where to put my bishop and it was dancing around all the time. Highly recommend bringing your bishops out to the 4th rank.
Okay. That's good to know. I mean, even just to know that, because my problem is and Luke knows this probably because the few times we've played, is I like to be aggressive with it. And with the light square bishop here, this is me trying to rein myself back. So I'm like, okay, what I really want to do is castle. So I'll bring the light square to E2. And then that way it's not in this danger zone anywhere. And I've never played Tired Piranha before or Joseph. And so I didn't know his skill level at all or anything like that. So I wanted to be a little more cautious this game.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead. And so all this happens.
Yeah, I was okay making a couple trades there. But then we get to here, totally left it hanging, felt awful about it. Because I could have made that move right here. I could have moved, bam, problem solved. Missed it. And then here he is. His knight just began harassing everything. And I just was like, if I could just get that knight out of here.
Now I remember you were commenting about how much you hated that knight.
Yeah. I was like, okay, at this point, it's not, he's prancing around with his pony. So
and it underscores the principle, Jacob, which you already know, I think, and that is knights love closed positions where they can hop around, and bishops love open positions. And so
I really can't remember strategies here. Yeah, again, with the queen, I know I just moved it up a spot and then moved it back a spot. I do kind of feel like I was wasting moves there, but at the same time, that's something I've gotten better at is minimizing collateral damage, basically. So.
Yeah, I think I was kind of waiting for you because I was kind of happy with my position.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really wanted to do something. I was just trying. My problem also is that I have like 3 or 4 strategies going on at once, but I can only do one at a time, and I struggle to pick one at a time.
Yeah.
Wow.
That happened quick.
Yes, it did.
So if you go back a few moves, I think
move through that
he
quick.
pulls out the knight, threatening my bishop. And go back one more. And I guess I just felt like, well, I can always get it with my pick it up with my knight. It's guarded.
Yeah, right.
Let me go ahead and put some pressure on his bishop, because if he takes the bishop, I can take his bishop, I can take his rook.
Man, yeah.
So I'm just kind of holding off on that with the threat of the bishop there.
Yeah.
And for me, I was just happy to have enough pieces to guard these major other pieces,
Yeah, I mean, you did a good job. Like Joseph played really solid, and all things considered, totally. you really gave a good fight.
So there, I'm gonna get check.
Yeah, Joseph, when we were in the Queen's Gambit, I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy knows this stuff. Like, I'm like, there's like, you clearly know this opening.
Well, I only do like 1 opening for black and 1 opening for white because I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. It's been so long, and I don't remember the names of openings and all that.
Sure. But yeah, I could tell you'd had experience with it.
Well, so here's the thing. He moves there, and I see a possible pin because I told you guys in the beginning I love to take rooks as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Because when my rook gets taken, I feel defeated right away. So, so I see a possible pin, and I see my rook is guarding my queen. I don't want to lose my queen, but there's opportunities to move things. But do you see the piece I left hanging at all?
Did you lose sight of the bishop? Is that what happened?
100%. And boom, there it goes. And when that happened, I was like, every game, there's always one game I make a huge blunder.
Yeah.
I started off with 3 blunders a game, so now I'm just trying to work my way down from 3.
Yeah.
So
Hey, you know,
Well, and here it would have been a trade for the knight, but because I was threatening your,
right,
yeah.
yes,
bishop
exactly.
there.
So it was a double whammy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would have been nice earlier if your knight swinging over to h4, like Joseph mentioned, was kind of clever. And I think given the right circumstance, it would have been nice to snatch his bishop, but he didn't really give you much time to do that.
Yeah, right. So then he's just playing really solid.
Yeah, just getting his pieces organized for the attack.
Yeah, I'm shaking in my boots. I mean, I'm like, I can possibly steal the game, possibly. And a new move in my queen here. He's obviously, I'm encouraging him to move his rook where he wanted to move it, wherever it was going to go anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, well, maybe I don't know. We'll see. Because that's what I thought he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I really thought that, that E1 square I've got protected with the rook and the knight. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you do want to try and get your rooks on open files as much as possible, too.
Totally.
Yep.
And then he moved there, and I was kind of surprised by that. So now I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's kind of.
I never thought about the queen moving down to there, and that was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Just have control.
But I mean, dude, this was your first tournament ever, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
like you've only been
since
at it for a
middle
couple
school.
weeks.
Since middle school. Okay,
Yeah.
the pieces are moving on their own. I don't know who's moving them. Is someone doing that? Anyone?
Yeah, that was me experimenting whether I had any control, and I sure do. Sorry about that.
No, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Go for
Yeah,
it.
you're good. No, I don't mind taking control. I was freaking out because no one responded the first time. So.
I was on mute anyway.
Okay. Okay.
The buttons work.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad to know that.
That is good. Yeah, I'm feeling really bad in this position, obviously.
Yeah.
So
you put up a fight, though. You put up a fight, and you've learned some things from it.
So this was Jacob, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, before I jump into anything, one of the things that Luke and I do during our games is talk about some of our takeaways, and I'm just wondering if there's any takeaway that you have from.
Yeah, I've still got to do better with the hanging pieces, and there's a couple other things. I'm actually. I know you mentioned the light squared bishop there on E2. But yeah, I'm feeling comfortable with some things here. I'm just trying to think of some takeaways still.
I mean, I'm just going to be bold and say I'd recommend to not fianchetto your queenside bishop for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can definitely work on that.
Yeah, the not fianchetto queenside bishop. You're getting your knights out first, which I'm sure you're playing to knights before bishops. That as a general rule, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good way to kind of jump into like how to approach an opening is making sure you get out just as a general rule before you're bringing those bishops out. One of the things that I would also really work on is make sure you're activating all of your center pawns.
Okay.
The name of the game is control the center of the board. These 4 squares, particularly, one of the reasons why I say I really like moving my bishop rank is because early on, if you can get that bishop out there, right? So knights before bishops, right? Like that. When you're charging those bishops out there, even if and this isn't what I would do, but once you get that bishop there, it's stopping this pawn advance, but it's controlling these center squares on the board.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can do this.
Yeah, and to get rid of that bishop, I have to move basically 3 pieces first before I can attack it, really.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Okay.
true.
I've got to pull up my knight. I need to support it on the e6 with the e6 pawn, and then I can pull it out the e5. So
Mhm.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it helps you too to get it helps you to get these pieces activated on really nice, like long diagonals that are controlling some pretty pivotal squares, right? Because the bishop in this position is attacking the f7 square. Sure, one
Yeah.
piece attacking the f7 square does nothing on its own, right?
Right.
You know, from here, if just, you know, terrible ideas just in general, right? But something as simple as that, you now have 2 pieces attacking that single pawn, and that's I mean, that right there is threatening checkmate in 1. I mean,
It's that theme I mentioned to you, Jacob, about the F2 and F7 squares in
You better believe that I remember that.
That's
yes.
it's a key element.
Yeah, and that square is always a weak square, and so bringing the bishop out to that spot is always good. Frees up your castle too.
Does any of the other 3 guys, do any of you want to give like a tip to Jacob regarding this game?
Well, just in general, starting out, I would recommend pick 2 or 3 openings and learn them. And play
Okay.
with those.
Yeah,
especially
good
starting
point.
out. Know them
Pick
inside
2 or
out.
3. Pick 2 or 3 simple.
Like the Roy Lopez, I'd recommend.
Mhm.
Maybe the Guaco Piano.
Mhm.
Simple
Which is an extension of the Italian game.
Yeah, they're interchangeable.
Well, let me ask you this. So the openings, if I pick a specific opening, does the mid game just kind of transition into its own thing, or
Well, yeah, the mid game always transitions differently, but there'll be themes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, the pieces are different, but if you play the opening, I mean, there's always the random crazy game where the pieces just they got dumped on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Help that.
I'm random and
In
crazy.
general, you'll notice themes like, okay, my goal in this position is to attack his weak pawn here, or you know, my
Okay.
goal is to advance my space majority on one side or the other. That's just what I found helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally do
and
that.
that's especially true. What he said is especially true when you see somebody that's not following basic opening principles. It throws you through a loop, and everything ends up looking like a pile of garbage because it's like everything's been thrown out the window because of what my opponent's doing, and so I just have to kind of play jazz.
Yes.
But you know what you want to do is you want to learn what those you know what. Pick an opening. I think the Gaucho Piano is a really good one to start.
Yeah. That's the first one I started with.
Yeah, I think the Scotch is a really good one to go with. The Roy Lopez, the Sicilian Defense, which is being done here on Black side. Those are all really good games to do. You know, one that I don't do, and I don't know that I've seen Luke do it much, is the King's Gambit. And
That'd be crazy to try that one.
yeah. King's Gambit, Queen's Gambit. Yeah.
I'm just gonna jump in here and say one thing real quick. I don't know if I'd recommend the Sicilian first, man. Like I think you should stick to E4, E5 because it's a lot of theory.
Don't
I think
do
that's
that.
fair.
Don't do that.
I think that's fair. I think if you were to pick one, I think the Ocho Piano, I think the Italian game is the best one to start off.
I think Russ was spot on with that.
Or the Queen's Gambit if you want to go D4.
Or the Queen's Gambit if you want to go D4.
And that'll help you to know if you're positional or tactical. But don't worry if you can't figure out which you are because it takes a while.
Yeah, I mean, what you're gonna do, what you need to do is you need to spam games playing this. You're gonna see this as a response. You're gonna do this. They're gonna do this, and then you're gonna do this, and and you're gonna see a million games like this.
Right.
What you're going to end up getting is you're going to get some games where an opponent is making a mistake, and you get to capitalize it. You have to learn you learn where those mistakes are in this opening.
Just get on YouTube.
Okay,
There's grandmasters going through every opening.
Yeah, it's crazy. Everything's for free these days. It's ridiculous.
Everything. Yeah, you get on YouTube. You look up the Italian game, and they're going to show you exactly what I did here, but they're going to show you like 12 different variations common to see, common traps to fall into, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, and then you're going to get into play the game, and then what is going to really throw you through a loop is you're going to do this, and then somebody's going to respond with this, and you're going to be like, I didn't see the Grandmaster covering that. It throws you off. But when you see something like that, that's when you just need to hammer through your opening principles.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
get my pawns to the center of the board.
Develop your pieces.
Develop my knights first.
Knights
Develop
before
my pieces.
bishops. Castle.
So that, because if we're saying the biggest thing that you have to do, if your number one rule from this position is control the center of the board, what should you do?
From here?
From here,
I would move my D2 pawn up to D4.
Exactly.
Nailed it. Perfect. That
most principled response.
Yep. And as long as you're going with that sort of response, I mean, you got things like this knights before bishop. You're developing that, right?
Yeah.
And you can do anything like this. Again, moving that piece to there. And if you look at just what is happening with this board, you're just crushing the center here. This isn't bad for black if black knows what they're doing, but it's a very complicated sort of opening to navigate, which is why I would play it.
Yeah.
I'd add that square.
So cool. Well,
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks for the insight, Tom, and all of you guys.
Totally appreciate it for sure, all of you.
And thanks, Ross, for the Joko piano. That's a really good
agreed.
piece of advice. Cool. Who wants to take it next? Well, I guess if no one else wants to volunteer, I'll do it. Okay. And then maybe after I go, Ross, you want to kind of flip the board from your perspective after I do mine and see what you were thinking on the flip side of the coin.
I'm assuming you're doing our game?
Yeah.
Heartbreak.
All right. So let's see. So Tom, you got it to if you want to move over to the Ross versus Luke board. Okay. So let me go ahead and go over to my comments. Okay, perfect. So obviously we're in black's perspective because I was playing as black. So in this point, I decided to do something I rarely do, and that is I played the perk. This is called the perk defense. But I had one goal here. I just wanted to take us into something that hopefully neither of us are as familiar with. I didn't want to play E4. I want to play Sicilian, or E5 rather. So I decided to do this. And of course, what did we say, Jacob? There we go. That's he's taking the center, just like we mentioned. And so here we go to, now the idea here is I could possibly fianchetto my bishop on the king side, but we'll see what happens. So here's his bishop coming in. All right. Now this is the point when, as soon as that pawn advanced, where I realized that obviously he had a real strong presence in the center. And being the fact that, obviously he's got that guarded here, there's really not much I can do. And at this point I started realizing that it would probably be wise for me to strike at the center right away to kind of break that pawn duo up. So I did. And then we get to this point where so then obviously, pinning the knight, pretty simple idea there. Okay, continuing development. Okay, so this right here, okay, so just taking it back to here, this is the first time in the game when I felt stuck. I didn't know how to be productive. I recognized that he's controlling the center quite well, but I didn't really know which piece to move or kind of how to be productive and continue my ideas. I was also looking for how can I develop some sort of attack, but the problem is as you guys can tell, black in this position is very jammed. I'm really struggling to find how I can gain space properly. And so this ended up being an inaccuracy. And what I should have done is actually probably something like, oops. So instead of that pawn move, I should have actually moved my D pawn here. This is actually what the computer recommended as well, but it's also an interesting idea because if you notice here, normally this would be a foolish move in the sense that obviously he could take and pick, which pawn he wanted to take mine with and kind of control the flow of the line. But there's one key element here that's helpful for me, and that is if I take this pawn here, do you notice how he actually has two pieces, he has two pieces that are hitting this, but one of them is a little stuck right now because it's pinned to his queen. And so if you go along with that theme, if I were to take this pawn and then he takes, I take, we get to a position where it's very opened up, and you either end with something like I have both of my knights toward the center, or after a series of exchanges, it basically kind of takes what was really cramped for me and just blasts it open. So it's kind of just this, much more dynamic open game that gives me more equalizing potential. So hopefully that makes sense. But I didn't. I decided to do my careless, weird move that made absolutely no sense or anything. And then, okay, now he's like, okay, what's your bishop going to do? You going to move back, or are you going to try to control that pin still? Here's another weird thing for me. So I brought it back, but I was scared to bring this here because I was thinking, okay, well, what if he advances his pawn? And, and if I bring back there, now he's got his knight hitting my bishop. So but the thing I was forgetting in that process is, so what? His knight takes my bishop. Sure, I don't have the bishop pair, but guess what? He's just weakened his king side quite significantly. And yes, to be fair, he does have a more offensive position than I do. And so he does have more, he would like to blast it open on my side. But the problem is he's blasted open on his side, of that, the king side. So all in all, I think if I were to rewind, I probably would maintain that pin and coax his other pawn up. Okay, so then after I did bring it back, and we get to this really weird thing where I actually get all of my pieces like on the back rank. And now, ironically enough, I kid you not, if you look at the chess engine here, it actually isn't really that much worse for me. And the reason why is, Tom, can you go ahead and real quickly just flip the board real quick? Yeah. I just want to show you now, because it looks really stupid for black, but now from this position, it is really hard to know what to do with either side. Because now notice here that, the idea, obviously a simple principle that white would want to do is advance this pawn, because you could see that he'd like to, since my pawns are, still in the back rank, they're on their first rank, it would be logical for white to kind of, start to advance these pawns, kind of gain space on the queen side and start an attack there. So Tom, if you want to flip back. But again, like I said, it's really this situation where it's hard for either of us to know. And again, I'll be interested to, when it's Ross's turn, to hear what his thoughts are on for this point. But guess what happens? Ta-da! He does start to bring the queen side in, and that's exactly what happens. Is he's gaining space in the queen side, and so he's already kind of got me locked in this position, and now he's going to, obviously he's threatening to open up the queen side, and he already has all his pieces kind of ready for something like that. So as we continue, this is an interesting part of the game where it was kind of a little dance with the bishop and knights and stuff. Kind of, we were trying to pry at each other's weaknesses there and see kind of, he's trying to open it up, but I'm like, I'm just gonna kind of wait till you decide. I want you to choose which pawn you want to advance, and I'll kind of work my pieces around that a little bit. Do a little crocheting there. And then once we get to this point, we're almost getting to a crucial moment for me. Okay, so here comes the king pawn advance. Ironically enough, this was an inaccuracy by the computer, but it makes sense. You're trying to open up that file for the rook, and after we, I take, bring my knight in there. So a series of exchanges here, and okay, now the bishops are lined up with one another. So this is a key theme that you'll see in the next few moves. We're kind of, waiting because we each have it guarded. Okay, now this is the first part of the game where I found a Zwischenzug, or in between intermezzo move. And so one of my favorite parts of chess, actually, because the idea here is I actually recognize, so let me go on to the next move real quick. So he lines up his queen and rook. But here's what I missed. I missed this move. So at this point, if I actually took with check, now if he decides to take that with the queen, obviously, then I just snatch up his other bishop. So you see, it's kind of like this in-between thing where now what happened? Well, I gained a pawn, and that pawn duo is really strong on, you know, on the 5th rank there. Okay, so and then we get to something like, what's that?
The plus you would be attacking his rook.
Exactly. And so then there you have it. The best move would probably be, you know, moving the rook there. So then you get something like this where it's a lot more equalized. So anyway, that's what I could have done there. But interestingly enough, when we get to this point, I actually did find my own Zwischenzug, and that was right here. If I move my rook there, he takes the pawn, I take with check, and so then after I have the check, then he takes me, and then I snatch his knight. So the idea, again, it's the in-between, but the whole thing is revolving around what's the threat. The biggest threat right now is his 2 pawns here, because these pawns are, you know, basically they're really locking my position down on the queen side. And what I really don't want to happen, obviously, is to have those advance. I would like one of them to advance now to clarify things, but obviously he's not going to do that, because that would lessen their strength right now. Okay, so then that's what happened. Take, and instead he moves the king there, which you know, either way, it still ends up with those pieces going off. Okay, so in this part, this is where the interesting dynamic play starts to. This is where I started to develop my strategy, so to speak. Of the whole thing revolves around counterplay, because here I had the idea of coordinating an attack with my rook and my knight, if my knight could somehow find its way to g3. So the idea is, you know, the knight would like to hop in here. Obviously, you know, you'd be forking the king and rook. It's a long shot, right? Because you have it takes a few moves to do that. But, you know, I'm trying to find some sort of counterplay, because I know these pieces are going to start, you know, slamming down, eyeing this pawn and getting ready to take it. So that's what happens. And now I decide, the computer actually called this an inaccuracy, but here's the logic behind it. As you know, a knight is worth less than a rook. And so it's a simple idea of guarding this with a minor piece, so that I could just kind of free up my queen to move elsewhere. All right, hitting my rook. So this, again, this is another Zwischenzug, because by hitting, now the idea is his threat is against my rook. Well, if I can create a threat bigger than that, then my threat wins. So then I win the tempo, and that's exactly what happened, because now, you know, with my rook moving out there, his queen has to move first, because that's a, you know, higher rated piece. Okay, and actually I was really happy at this point, because as you guys have seen, the whole time I was defending against this attack on my pawn. So I'd like to kind of, you know, do a few exchanges off with those rooks to kind of give me some options for counterplay and not have to be tied down in defense. So that's exactly what happens. And now, okay, I could have done this earlier, but now I'm like, okay, I have a pin on, you know, with the knight to the queen. Hopefully I can use this somehow. And this is where you can see it kind of starts to switch from defense to offense for me. After I got my queen in there, I recognized that this pawn is now hanging. And obviously, I think we were both pretty low on time too. But anyway, so to be fair, you know, it's easy in that kind of situation to make a blunder. And actually, I think, if I remember correctly, Ross, I think this was literally your first mistake of the whole game. And so, like, that's a testament to how intense this game was, because we were both playing pretty decent. But you know, so you get to this point, and okay, I have to decide, the computer actually liked this move. But I'm like, I'm going to simplify this. Keep in mind that as soon as he takes that pawn, this pawn is now a pass pawn. Okay, so I'm threatening this, hitting my rook. All right. As soon as the exchange happens, then I recognize, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to try to snatch this pawn off, so then we each have a pass pawn on that side. So the king comes there, take, take, take. All right, now the kings are eyeing each other. All right, here we go. My first big mistake in the game. So now Ross and I have each made a significant mistake, and mine is really bad. So this actually, if you notice what happened here, I was controlling these squares so that his king could not enter my territory. And well, when I went here, I totally gave up everything. So now his king can go wherever it pleases. And obviously you have to think through which is best, but either way, it's a really unwise move, because after this happens, now this is interesting too, because yeah, it looks cool. It's like, oh yeah, I can advance it too. How clever, but not really that awesome, because guess what? This king is tied down to guarding this pawn and preventing this guy from getting too far. So from here, it didn't happen in the game, but if this pawn simply advanced, then you get this advance from both sides until we each get queens. It becomes dynamic play, and I go from a winning position to a very challenging, sharp position where allegedly either of us could have taken the game anywhere we wanted to. Okay, so then we decided to go this way, so I take that, and obviously at this point, now here's the funny thing. I go here, but why go there? Because then it just brings him back here, and now we're then I have to come back, and I'm where we started. So the better thing is I should just simply advance this pawn, because I'm going to be able to have a pass pawn. Because if I do that, just to kind of show you, if I go here, then he can't go here. Oops, my clicking's not working. You can't go here, here, here. So something like this, and then I'd go here, and the pawns would kind of move around. But then once that happened, basically I have a pass pawn that'll queen. Yeah, so I think my biggest takeaways are recognize the threats of both sides. So recognize the opponent's threats and try to formulate a game plan around those threats. So in the game, basically the idea was, the biggest threat, as I saw it, again, Ross, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I go way, way back here, the biggest threat that I noticed through this game is obviously, theoretically, Ross could have advanced on either side of the board. He had really good flexibility here. He could expand on the queen side or king side, but the queen side at this point seemed more natural, and it was closed. But once this happened, you see it already. Let's imagine that this pawn is gone. There's two pieces hitting here, and that's going to be my weak spot right here. And so that's exactly what happened, because as the moves progressed, you get to this point where finally I did snatch that pawn duo, because that was the other threat. But then, then this pawn is my weak spot. So I had to find a way to parry that threat and present a counter threat that's equal or stronger than that one. And it turned out, in my favor, but, it could have gone either way. And I'm just amazed, because in all honesty, I thought I was a goner for a while with just playing defense for who knows how long, in a very close position. So, Ross, do you want to hop in here and kind of take it from your side? Maybe we'll flip the board to White's perspective.
Sure. I can't control the board, obviously. So if you want to,
yeah,
get going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, you played, like, was this the modern or something, which I know nothing about?
It's
so.
the perk, but yeah, similar idea.
Yeah, so I just played basic moves. I didn't know. I don't have any book knowledge in this opening.
I don't either.
So keep going. Next move, and yeah, and then right about keep going. Yeah, and right about here, I just decided I'm going to advance on the queen side. My primary goal was to get the pawn to, just look at the bishops.
Yep.
They're both eyeing the queen side. They're beautifully placed. I got the rook over, let's see, A8, and the queen is going to be over, over there. When you drop the knight back to, let's see, is that D8? I assumed your plan was to push, like do the King's Indian classic break with F5. So that's why I moved my queen, developed it to is it F2?
C2.
So, okay, yeah, to F2. And go forward.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, so my primary, if you look, my goal over the next few moves was to push the C4, C5 pawn push. That was what I was aiming towards for like quite a while. So I pushed my knight over there. Go back a few moves. Yeah, right there. I pushed my knight there to C3, B3, excuse me. Got my knight to B3 with the idea of supporting the pawn push with the understanding that he'd most likely push it away. If he takes the pawn on B4, I'm very happy because then my rook has an open file.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. And I was happy with him closing the position because then it just kind of made him more passive. So, of course, he pushed the pawn. The knight's job was a completed drop back. Then I was thinking about just locking everything down and attacking on the king side with B5, just pushing my pawn to B5. And then your bishop there is kind of a miserable piece.
Yep, it sure
I
is.
decided not to do that. So I just ganged up. I was looking for the C4, excuse me, C5 push again. Next move. And I just calculated that it wouldn't work. So I tried this little trick. Of course, I don't know if you saw it or not, but you avoided it. So if I push B5, he takes with either one of his pawns. At the end of all those exchanges, his bishop on B7 is hanging.
I did not see that. I'm glad I didn't fall into it. I didn't see the line per se, but I did see the idea that it was an X-ray on my bishop.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So I think it would have got me enough tempo for that pawn push to be successful. So you moved your bishop, I think, was it to C or A6 again? Yeah. So then I decided this obviously isn't working. So I think it was my next move. I'm moving my knight. Yeah. So if he's not going to break the F file push, I am.
And that's exactly what happened.
That's what I did. And I know I think I ran through the computer.
Yeah.
The computer doesn't play human chess. This seemed like the best way to keep the initiative.
Yeah.
And draw a few pieces away from the queen side. So I took, and then, it just seemed like I'm getting everything I wanted here. Snack, and then I push. And I have enough pieces to support it. And then at this point, I pretty much thought I'm very much better.
Oh yeah. Your strong pawn duo here is super good.
Up until this point, just watching Luke's position makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I never thought like I was winning, but I thought up until like at the very end of the game, I would have taken my position over his every day of the week. Let's put it that way.
And here's the funny thing. I actually enjoyed it. I'm weird. I'm like so weird. These close positions make me so intrigued with pawn breaks.
I just like to be on the breaking side.
I guess I didn't want to be on the broken side. So yeah.
So here I should have, in hindsight, I should have snapped off your bishop first. I think would have saved you that in between move you were talking about. I don't think.
You want to take it? You want me to take it through that?
I would have pushed. You would have taken my. What was your next move?
So right here I took.
Yeah, and I think I should have just taken your bishop there before capturing the pawn.
Yeah, so that would have been your in-between move, essentially.
Yeah, I would have gained a tempo.
Yep.
It's not that big a deal. Anyway, advance, please.
Okay, let's go back to... Okay,
there. And then, what was the next? I think was it my knight to... Keep going. Yes, right here is where I I think, yeah, you took the knight with your bishop, and I should have just taken with the rook right away instead of moving my king. This is a human speaking, not a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Because then my whole plan was if rook takes, and instead of moving the king, then you would have taken my knight, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking at queen to g3.
Oh, queen of g3. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was my plan. Queen g3, threatening the rook, but the primary goal is that c3 pawn, that c2, c7 pawn is weak.
Yep.
And I had ideas of potentially sacrificing my rook for your bishop, rook for your knight. That was something I was looking at because obviously that's hanging right now.
Yep.
You can't capture
Do
back.
you guys see that, Jacob? Do you guys see how if he takes the knight, I can't take it back because he's pinning that pawn to the king.
Yeah, good call.
So if I'd played it that way, I think I would have won because I would have just been able to.
Yeah, I think so.
To convert it into an attack. As it was, I moved my king. I was just kind of rattled. Well, I wasn't rattled. I didn't have a good grasp of the position. I felt like at this point,
before you move on this position, if you were black and he'd gone to this position, I mean, my move would have been moving the rook over to g5.
Yeah, and then I would have captured the pawn on c7.
The pawn. Gotcha.
I would have been quite happy.
Yep.
Because then I have that passer on d5, and that thing's got wheels. It's going to take a lot to stop that.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, that was.
Wait. Let's play that through just a little more.
Okay.
So I can't control the board, so you're going to have to do it for me.
So take with the queen.
Yeah, I take with the queen, and I presume. I mean, I assume you would have exchanged queens.
I actually
I'm thinking take h3.
What's that?
Take h3.
That's kind of
h3. Yeah, I saw that. But then I thought I could simply take the rook on b8
with tempo.
Yes. And then drop my queen back to h2.
Gotcha.
And then just chase his queen around because obviously he's not going to want to exchange being so much material down. So that's why it seemed to me that okay, it's been a long time since I looked at this game. Okay, maybe h2 wasn't the best. But
no worries.
Well, I mean that's probably what you would do.
Where I can defend and protect my pieces.
But I agree that I would have much preferred your position over mine at that point. If we went down that line, that was a really solid strategy on your end.
Okay.
Yeah,
anyhow,
go back.
Thanks, guys. I have to leave, but appreciate this and let me know when we're doing something like this again.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. All right, talk to you later.
My pleasure.
Right. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so let's see. Let's go back to, where do you want me to go back to, Ross?
So where the bishop takes.
Okay, so let's see.
That move, yes. So I moved my king, which is, I believe, in hindsight, I don't know what the computer says, but personally I think that's the worst move because it's more passive.
Yeah.
I moved my king, you take my knight, I took your bishop, and then you played rook to g5, which kind of
that was kind of
plans there. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna go for that c pawn, keep going, and then you move back there. I can't remember what and then you played this move, which I thought was fine. I was happy to trade down because I thought this was a winning endgame. And then rook takes, keep going. And then I think this is my first strategic blunder, not necessarily tactical, is I believed your attack. I thought there's something to this. When I went back and looked through it, it was more of a mirage, I believe.
It was.
My strategy. I think I should have just played e5. Just continued pushing in the middle and, making you prove what a dangerous attack you have, which I don't think you did have. So I should have just kept doing that. But anyway, I went back with my queen, which wasn't losing, but it kind of granted you the initiative.
Correct.
Keep going. And at this point, you gained a pawn, which kind of I was bummed, but I still thought I was just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then here I was happy to just trade down.
It's funny you mentioned you were happy to trade down, because even though I was, definitely in a worse position than you, I still was happy to trade down too, because your threats were so large that, I was happy to simplify it a little bit.
Yeah, and as I recall, I was running extremely short of time.
Mm-hmm.
I barely managed to make it to this tournament anyway, getting out of work. So
yeah, thanks so much for joining.
So yeah, so anyway, here this should just be a draw, I think.
I think so too.
But keep going. I only have one more crucial point in the game to point out. This was all, I'd pretty much seen all of this. And then you played this move, C5, which if I had, that's the only move in the game I'd really like to have over, because you played that and then I retreated with my king. I should have just pushed A5.
Yep.
Then it's a draw. Maybe I'm marginally better.
Because you have, I agree. Because your king is better placed in the center, and then we'll both have queens.
But that doesn't mean anything. So,
mm-hmm. Yep.
If I had that, as soon as I played that move, I just didn't see it for some reason.
Yeah.
And you whipped it out, and I had a few seconds left, so I just threw my king back, and that lost.
Yeah.
There on out. So if I just advanced my pawn, it would have been a draw most likely. Yep. So I was pretty bummed. And then this is just mopping up. There's nothing really constructive here.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's my feelings on the game. I thought I was definitely better right up until I wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just...
any key takeaways?
Don't panic when you see a move you didn't see.
That's good.
I saw most of his moves right up here up until that C. I don't know why. It was just you'll have a blind spots in him playing that pawn 2 squares forward. Just
well, and I like how you pointed.
Is have a plan, because my plan for about 10 moves in this game was that C4, C5 pawn push, and it just wasn't working. So I decided to loosen things up with the F4 push before I went back to that side of the board. So just have an idea what you want to do. And, at this point of the game, I was sitting pretty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You had so much more space than me. It was crazy. Yeah. And that was kind of my one goal, is to prevent that pawn push, because you and I both recognize that if you got that solid pawn push, and even with the tempo, then I would have been in trouble.
Well, and I remember that game we played before where I squished you in the attack.
Oh, man. You squished me really bad that game. That's what made me scared about this one.
What was that?
That's what made me scared about doing this one.
Oh yeah, that's the next game we should go over. That's a fun game.
Yeah, you demolished me.
But this was a really interesting game. Were you thinking about F5 at all? The F5 push?
I actually, oh wait, let me go back.
Right there. That's what I thought you were aiming for.
Ironically enough, I wasn't, and here's why. Because I knew that you had more space on the board than me, all over the place. And I knew that you had a stronger position than me. Like, that much is undeniable. However, what I also recognize is that if I move that there, I'm going to open up your bishop that was already facing that way. Tom, if you remember our first game on our channel, it was that theme. And because your bishop was locked in, this is arguably one of the worst. What's that?
And the queen's behind it too.
Exactly. So essentially, I'm just unleashing your forces on me with that. So take it or leave it. The whole
reason I played C2 was kind of prophylaxis.
Yeah.
To prevent that push.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a few moves earlier, before we started our dance.
Yeah.
in the bishop.
Right.
But
yeah.
Yeah, when you dropped your knight back, I just thought for certain that he was looking to push and blow, get some space, and I wanted to prevent that.
And who knows? Maybe it would have been a good idea, but like I said,
lost the pawn. But
I
mean, you had the idea to push that. Let's see, that E pawn to E4, potentially 4 king, somewhere down the road.
Yeah. To like what Jacob, if you see what he's saying, like if I eventually had something like this, right? That's what you mentioned, Russ. Yeah, something simple like that. And then of course,
these aren't hard calculations.
No, and then also like you have the knight can plop in there on an outpost too.
Yes, exactly. So That's what I thought you were aiming for. But it was a good, really enjoyable game, and
Yeah,
I just wish I could have had that one move at the end back, and it would have been a draw.
I know. Yeah. So, but hey, I played better than the last time we played, huh?
Oh yeah, that was. We played like how many games in that little
We
series?
played like 5. You definitely took the majority of them. So, and I feel like I mean, don't you feel like I've grown as a player from as
Well,
exemplified
you're
in
rated
this one?
higher than me, so of course.
Well,
I
rating
think
doesn't
you're rated higher than
matter.
me. I don't know what I'm rated now, but
Who cares? But
no, I feel like we're very evenly matched, just like back in Grand Rapids when we were both.
I know that's what's exciting. Like, I kid you not, it's so cool for me. Like, kind of getting back into things with since so long. Like, I really have enjoyed that.
Yeah,
So
like 20 years ago, something like that.
we still look young. Come on.
Ross, you were in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, Luke and I were best friends there for a few years.
Oh yeah, we go way back.
I was just about to ask if Ross and Tom knew each other, but apparently not.
No. And
I know.
Ross, you said you're in Kalkaska now?
Casca, yeah, just outside Traverse.
That's cool.
Okay.
Yeah, this is. I mean, honestly, you guys, I need to be transparent and say I'm really excited because like you three, like, okay, Ross, we were best friends when I was in middle school. Tom, we were best friends when I was in high school, and then Jacob, I met you in college, or prior to that. But like,
Yeah.
it's really cool for me because it just goes to show you that things like this, common interest, can really kind of bring people back together. But
You
Totally.
actually taught me how to play.
but yeah, I didn't know I taught you. I thought that was Ernie who did.
You gave me the book,
Oh.
and then I kind of figured it out from there. And then
Yeah,
we
yeah.
played during church services.
Yeah.
Not very religious, but it was fun.
Oh man. Well, thanks so much for your thoughts, Ross. I appreciate that. That was really insightful. Well, Chris, are you still in for the long haul? You ready to do yours?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. Let's jump in this here. Let's get to the other board. Tom, if you want to go to the
Oh yeah, that's me.
the Chris versus Ross board. Carl Khan defense. Whoa! I don't even know if I looked at this one. Yikes!
As soon as I saw Carl Khan, I was like, oh.
No!
My pet.
I don't know what that even means.
I love this.
It's okay. It's a different defense. It's not not as common usually on our level. But anywho, and
What do you mean
Yeah.
not as common at our level?
what's that?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I see E4, E5, and Sicilian. E4, E5, Sicilian. E4, E5. I mean, like, I see those
yeah. Oh,
9 out of 10 times. I almost never see the Carl Khan.
I like to be different, and I
Yeah.
play this defense a lot, and I've just kind of fallen in love with it. It's my pet opening. I play like the Sicilian occasionally, but this is kind of my go-to, especially when I'm like trying to win.
It's so solid, Like-
It's solid, but if you know what you're doing with it, you can
You can get dynamic
gems,
too.
I guess. Like I'm a huge exponent of the Cairo Con. I advise you all to look at it, but it's
Cool.
it's my favorite because you
feel
kind of
in-
dictate what's going to happen from the word go.
Yeah, I kind of feel inspired already. Okay.
Yeah.
So Chris, take it away, man.
Well, first of all, I've got to echo Jacob's comments. I was in the 6th grade chess club. Haven't done anything formal since. So I'm just here to learn. You guys mentioned trying to learn 2 or 3 openings. I'm just trying to learn 1 at this point.
I hear you.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So chess is a lot of fun. I think it's, I'm not saying I'm the oldest guy here, but I'm just old enough now that I've realized, okay, as I get older, I want to get some hobbies that I can do for the rest of my life. And I see elderly people doing crossword puzzles and things like that to keep their mind sharp. So I've decided chess is what I'd rather have that be my thing. I think chess is a lot cooler than word searches
For sure.
and crossword puzzles. So that's where I'm at. I just want to learn. I haven't looked at this game since Ross beat me. So let's see.
Do you know how to go through it? Like the air? Yeah.
Okay, so if I just click that, I'm gonna guess this is what I always do, but then he stopped it right away. Usually I bring up my bishop to c4, but immediately puts pressure on the middle, and so I usually just pass the pawn right there. because I don't know what else to do. At least I kind of keep it in the middle,
Mhm.
and then I usually will probably try to bring the queen's pawn out. Yep, that's what I did. So I don't know where my first big mistake is. I'm hoping you guys will help me figure that out.
You're following the main line.
Yeah,
So-
this seems all reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for not knowing it, you sure did a good job there in the first few
Yeah.
moves.
I guess I tried to get tricky and threaten your queen.
That was good, actually.
Instead of moving my bishop, I probably should have just been conservative and moved my bishop, I'm guessing.
No, I think I like that better.
I think that was
and
stronger
I
to you.
spent a lot of time. I think I spent more time here than in any part of the game analyzing whether I could take the bishop or not.
Yeah, it
just
was
too
a
hot to
challenge.
grab.
So I'm curious, why didn't you take the bishop at this point?
Because I took the bishop. I don't know if one of you can put this up there. Bishop takes bishop.
Oh yeah.
I haven't looked at this. This was just what I was looking ahead with. Bishop takes pawn takes bishop. Excuse me. Pawn takes pawn. Then you're threatening my knight, and my rook is, hanging as well. So even if I took your rook, you would take back. So rook takes rook. Rook takes rook.
Yeah.
Then all I could see
Gives me an open file there.
was let's see what did we see here?
Yeah, that's pretty mean because I mean you got a lot.
I know.
Queen B8, which looked incredibly. No, hold on, I can't remember. I think I just saw this position. I think I'm losing.
Yeah, I think you would have been too.
So that's why I decided, I can't take that now. So I just decided to, keep developing and, leave the ball in your court.
Yeah.
Real quick,
Okay.
Ross, right here, moving back in that position, moving that D5 pawn forward to kind of fork the queen and bishop, would that, because you got the knight protecting that square. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the bishop could just take because the knight is pinned to the king by the bishop.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. No, but I hear. If it wasn't, that would have been.
The pieces
And
were
the
moving a
speed
lot, and I was like,
in
wait,
the
I think I saw a
Khan-
fork. No, I
In the
didn't.
Cairo Khan, as I was talking about themes, that pawn chain from F7 to D6, D5, excuse me, is your strength.
It's kind of similar to the French defense in that sense, huh?
It is.
Yeah.
So, but that's you don't break that up unless you're for a darn good reason. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that. So then we just keep going.
Well, right here is where you find your mistake. If you left your E5, E5 pawn hanging.
E5. Oh, right there.
Yeah, when you moved your bishop away. Well, you kind of had to because you had to protect your bishop. But when that pawn falls, I just have two pawns in the center, and you don't have any. And then
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not familiar with Carl Khan at all. I mean, is that E pawn push to E5 early in the game like that? Is that pretty typical?
That's the advanced variation. Yeah, that's pretty common. And then the theme, at least the way I play it, is to attack the pawn that's usually on D4 and on E5.
Okay.
But again, we're talking. That's theory, and it's.
So how could I have kept that pawn from getting hung?
Go back.
Capture the knight.
Yeah,
Instead
you
of
would have
retreat.
captured the knight instead of moving away.
I should have traded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of moving, so right here you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, or instead of, I guess, a little more crude, instead of moving out your knight. Hold on. I think.
What if you just doubled up on here?
Well, it was still not this move that you took, right? Yeah, because you still had to move that rook to get out. So it was here at this position that you.
Oh
needed
yeah.
to
Okay.
capture.
Yeah, even if you doubled up, I'm just sitting there.
Yeah, I forgot about the rook in the back rank there.
Yeah.
So Right?
And if you'd have taken, I would have taken with the pawn.
Yeah, so you'd have a better
And
center.
then I really like that position. I'm pushing.
Yeah, that's
pushing
brutal.
d5 with my pawn, and it's.
I don't
know.
know.
It's just
I
pleasant.
don't think that's too bad though. That's not too bad for white.
I think it's hard to defend, but I think it's possible. Honestly,
I mean, I'm seeing something like
if you plug
that.
this into the computer, I'd probably say equal.
mhm.
But it's much easier for me to develop a plan. I have a clear plan. I'm going to push my pawns in the middle.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if we go back further, I think honestly, once we get to, so like seriously at the very beginning, and this
You
is some,
deviated here. Usually, um, go back. Yeah. Bishop, queen takes.
oh, sorry. Queen takes.
Yeah, that's just a simple way to lose a pawn.
Yep. Because
But-
yeah.
It's not that big a deal at the beginning because you get piece development. I just like to play that line. You get the 2 bishops. I get an extra pawn. Kind
Mhm.
of a fair trade.
Mhm.
So if you don't want to go into that, you protect your you either play h2 early on, h3, excuse me, or you move your knight out to d2, your other knight, protecting your knight.
This just reminds me so much of the French, like so much of the French.
Yeah. So does that make sense, Chris? So the idea is, you know,
Yeah.
either H3 or if it was me, I personally might have done I don't know. It's a challenge to know kind of how, you know, how to formulate a plan. But I think that was really this pin was actually quite strong in the sense of this pawn hanging. And that's kind of where things got a
And
little challenging.
whoever was it, Thomas? Yeah, this is the French with the added benefit. I'm a tempo down, but my bishop's on a better square.
Yes. And now that I'm thinking about it, you end up bringing your queen to C7, right?
Yep.
And that's really common. That's common.
B7, or no, I originally brought it to B6.
B6. Yeah, that's the spot, man.
Mm.
So
So going
Yeah.
back,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So allow for coverage of that knight with something besides my queen so she doesn't get forced out from protecting the middle.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's find another mistake. What's the next one?
Yeah, I'll let you control it again.
Oh, well, you'll see the mistake faster than I probably would. You're welcome to control that.
No, go for it.
So we're here. Select my queen. Guess I'm willing to trade, which we do. Which, did you win that trade? Does that give you an extra piece?
I want a pawn.
Yeah, he went a pawn.
Oh, okay. I did get a bishop in the beginning.
Yeah, so I just saw I was going to win a pawn in that variation. I was happy to go into an end game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you guys kind of delineate opening from middle from end? Like, you know, how do you know when you've kind of transitioned? I'm just curious if there's some sort of rule of thumb or.
I mean, Tom, were you want to say something?
I mean, I would say for me, one of the big signs is castled, right? If you castled, and you have developed your minor pieces, so your rooks are connected in the back row. So if I were to go back here, you said middle to or beginning to middle or middle to end.
Well, I guess both.
I
Okay.
mean, yeah, because like just to piggyback off that, I would say overarchingly, when your pieces are out there, now you're going to figure out how to use them to coordinate an attack. So you're kind of you've shifted your mindset from development to strategy of attack.
Yeah.
And
At
then
this point in time, you're mid game.
And almost always when you exchange queens, usually that's a sign the end games. Either there.
Okay.
That's a good point. Yeah. And then from mid game to end game too, Chris, I think the idea there is usually once your kings start becoming a little bit more like you want to get them out there, but also usually you're a couple minor pieces and or major, and then you're essentially it's maneuvering kind of strategies as opposed to like clear attacks, and your pawns become a lot stronger.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that comes from like the amount of material on the board, which I think Ross hits a good point of the queen exchange. if I'm looking at the board state like as it is right here, you know, we're starting to enter into an end game, but because there are still the 2 minor pieces on both sides on the board, you're not really in the position yet where you want to be pulling your king out. I mean, somebody can correct me if I'm speaking out of my butt. But once this exchange happens, we're starting to see those minor pieces dwindle down more. And I think that we're really moving into an end game at this point.
And it looks to me, if I had to call this, I'd say black has a way better position because you've got 2 rooks on a file. You've got more pawns than I do. I mean, at this point, can you pretty much just call the game and say pretty clear black's has the winning position?
When I was confident I was going to win. Another thing is your bishop is a horrible piece because all my pawns are on light squares, and that thing's just, you know, chewing on granite wherever it goes. So.
Yeah, well, and you're only missing 1 pawn. You're only missing this pawn on the C. So it's going to be tough your weak pawns in this structure are the ones in the back row. That's B7, F7, 7. And if you're just thinking about how can I attack those with my light square bishop, oh my God, like it's going to be a nightmare to get to any of them. You're going to have to get over to A4 because that's the only spot that you can go to formulate an attack. I mean, shoot, by then, you know, and this is assuming you don't have any pawns in your way, right? Because your own pawns are in your way. But he just, if he advances that pawn up to B5, then all of a sudden he's got that covered. It's damn near impossible to attack his pawn structure with your bishop.
And Chris, just to kind of like, again, piggyback and summarize kind of like an overarching perspective based on what they just said, I would say your pawn structure. Look at the pawn structure and compare that with the minor pieces on the board because, you know, bishops, if the pawns are in such a way that the bishop can't really go anywhere, well, then that's pretty much a dead piece. Whereas conversely, if the board is just opened up and there's either no pawn, hardly any pawns, or just like, you know, very few, and it's just wide open and there's a bishop, well, now all of a sudden it's the opposite. Now you don't want the knight, you'd rather have the bishop. So you know, looking at the pawn structure and, you know, because you imagine like probably these rooks are going to get traded, right? I mean, like at least one of the rooks, if not 2, are going to get traded. And so in that sense, what would you rather have, the close position with the knight or the close position with the bishop with the pawns on the color of the bishop? You know, so I think that's hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, it is very much so.
So like if you had a dark square bishop, for instance, instead of a light square bishop, and if it wouldn't be as bad. It wouldn't be as
So
well,
wouldn't my best? Oh, go ahead.
You had said like is it just call it for black at this point? I just want to caution too, like certainly black is winning at this point in time, but I never would advocate for throwing in the towel, right? You get this position and say, okay, well, black obviously has it, and so I quit. Because this is a point that a lot of people that are, you know, around our level, you know, they haven't done a lot of end games. They don't have a lot of practice with end games. And it's very easy to get to a position like this and end up blowing it, right? If somebody, if Ross were to arbitrarily just break up his advantages that he has, right? Maybe he starts advancing these pawns, breaking up his own pawn structure. Then all of a sudden, like, he could turn your weak bishop into a very strong bishop. And so you have the opportunity to capitalize it. And he only has a 2-pawn advantage, which while a 2-pawn advantage is pretty substantial at this point, if you could get it down to maybe you could make it so you can end up gaining a 1 pawn, right? If you can end up taking 1 pawn and leaving him with 1 pawn advantage, and you could make that 1 pawn into his h7 pawn, let's say, then all of a sudden you can turn the game potentially into a draw. So by no means is the game over at this point. From my perspective, this is almost where where my learning is really like starting to focus right now.
Yeah.
This is where the game is like actually beginning. And mind you, a lot now focuses, and when you're getting to the point where you're thinking about this stuff, then you're thinking about like, okay, how do I play my mid game with this stuff in mind so that when I end up in this position, it's favorable for me.
Yeah. I think when you're thinking about exchanges in particular, you want to know what kind of piece do you want in the pawn structure that is on the board. You know, imagine like a lot of the pieces are gone. That's kind of what you're thinking in your mind. Like when I do exchanges, you don't just do exchanges to get pieces off the board and further into the game. You're wanting to know which type of minor piece do you want in this pawn structure. That's for me one of the most helpful insights to this type of thinking.
I'd
think
never
that's great
thought of
advice.
that before.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
anywho,
So maybe my only would it have been a better idea for me maybe to try to double my rooks and trade some rooks down?
probably.
Yeah, it looks like I tried to do that, but
Because obviously the rooks on the 7th rank is always a danger when there's 2 of them there.
yeah. Yeah, it's just an army of pawns.
Yeah, that's the problem. He just kind of built them up over time, and then, you know, now it's just kind of not really much you can do.
Yeah, that's a big advantage there.
Spread across the whole board there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. There's a couple new ideas for me for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. Thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. I know it took a little longer than we intended for this, but you know, in the future, if you guys are interested in doing something like this again, we'll definitely, try to, be cognizant of that. And, I think it's really awesome obviously we have a wide array of skill levels here. And, if I were to be totally insane here and just go out on a limb and say, I think probably Ross is the strongest player here. But I think we all are, I think we're all, as we're learning, it's exciting to see the themes. You always have those little light bulbs go off, those little aha moments. And I think for all of us, we're in a different space with that, where those light bulbs happen. But something like this is invaluable because Tom and I were talking the other day. This is the last thing I'll say, but we were saying how, in 2020, and we mentioned all the free YouTube videos and all this jazz online, you can actually get away. I'm just going to be crazy here and say, I think you can actually get away with improving, really solidly without a chess teacher, because historically they would say, oh yeah, get a chess teacher, get a chess tutor if you want to, have a grandmaster teach you in person. Like that's the way to, like hone in your game. But honestly, we have so many resources. We have the chess engine. We have the, we have the free videos. We have, insights of fellow colleagues. And I feel like all those combined really are more than sufficient to get someone all the way to an expert, if not, barely entering the master level someday. So
I have a question for Ross, if you can answer this. I'm just wondering, because I've seen the French and I've played against the French a little bit more, and I guess what I'm seeing is being the breaking point between the Caro-Kann and moving into the French is this pawn push that you have here. Is that fair to say? You're on mute. Sorry.
you're on mute.
Yeah, that's where you lose the tempo, because I used to play the French quite a lot.
Yeah.
I used to play it. I loved it. And I like this position that's on the board. Obviously, the bishop would still be on C8, excuse me. But I like this position. I like to play out of it. But a lot of times they would play the exchange variation, which opened it up, but I just found kind of dull.
Yeah.
But I found with Caro-Kann I could get this position almost every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a better bishop, I'm down a tempo, but that's a price I'm willing to pay.
I got it. So you're the benefit that you do is
well, let's just play a French. Go back.
Hey guys, I gotta jump. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris. Have a good one.
So French would be
Yeah,
that.
E6, and then
Yeah.
D4 is the normal move, and then D5, and then the variation that I loved it when they would do that, because then I would just instantly push C5, and
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously that's not better for black in any way whatsoever. I just like to play those positions.
I feel like it's
Sure.
easier. I think it's easier to comprehend how to
I've
kind of
never liked
continue.
to play the French from the white side.
No, I hate it.
Yeah.
But I love to play it from the black side. But lots of times, if you go back, people would just take on D5, and I didn't like those games. It just felt boring.
Yeah.
So, but the Caro-Kann, you do C6, and you almost always get that pawn chain. Yeah, and then D4.
Oops.
Or that one too, but the most common move is the advanced variation.
D4,
D4, and then D5, and then E5.
Yep.
And then you get to bring this
Then
out.
you bring out your bishop,
It's so natural.
and then you advance your pawn to E6, and then it plays itself. You're
Except
solid.
for the fact that the bishop could have been taken by the queen. But point is,
Okay.
the bishop.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How could
But,
the bishop
yeah.
be taken by the queen?
Well, yeah, when the
That
bishop.
makes up a move warrior.
Yeah,
there,
right there.
I
Oh
missed
yeah,
it.
right. Yeah, usually.
The bishop could go to the other spot, though.
How did we get here?
The reason why it didn't happen in the game is
with the
because
advanced variation. Excuse me, the advanced variation is a bit different. The bishop goes to F5,
Yep.
Okay.
and then the next move is for white to exchange it off with bishops D3. But
Oh yeah.
yeah,
And
if you
then
play
we get
black, I mean the light squared bishop is always a problem in these. But you just exchange it off, and then it's just a preference of mine.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Totally.
No, that's very interesting because I have certainly played against the Caro-Kann a couple of times. I mean I see it occasionally, but it's pretty rare for me to encounter it. I mean I think that more often than not I'm seeing you know, I've seen a lot of Sicilian. Yeah, and I mean I would say I even see like more modern defenses. Even
Yeah,
more.
I do see quite a few of those.
Yeah.
I switched over from Ross, since I kid you not, since we played the game when you destroyed me when I did the modern, I actually switched. That was my pivotal point where I switched I stopped playing modern for the most part, and I switched it to King's Indian.
King's Indian? Ah, yeah.
Because getting the knight before the bishop, like, it's just so passive and hard to do much when you're trying to understand pawn breaks at my level with the modern, because you lose space really quickly. And so that's where I usually get into trouble. But with the King's Indian, you get the knight out first, and so then you're already covering that, the E4.
Shortly after that I switched to playing the Caro-Kann,
That's so funny.
and I switched to playing E4 predominantly as opposed to D4 because
Yeah,
it's more
dynamic.
more tactics. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I think it's been really helpful for me. Hopefully, Jacob, you got a few things out of this too with all of everyone's discussed.
Hey, I'm lucky if I can keep up. So,
well, we just appreciate you being here, and hopefully it was beneficial for you too, Ross, with some of these.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Ross, if you're ever in Grand Rapids, feel free to reach out to me and.
Oh yeah, just send me a friend request on chess.com and any of you, please. And
you are Drunken Knight.
Drunken Knight. Yep.
Drunken Knight. Okay.
cool
Stuff. Well, have a wonderful week, you guys, and
after all these years. And,
yeah, I know it's been way too long. And for all you few viewers out there who are watching this right now, if you watch this whole time, you will have learned a few things. I guarantee it. But till next time, continue to improve your game.